Hey all, welcome to the Common Good Podcast. Doug Paget here out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, somewhere hunkered away outside of Fayetteville, Arkansas. Rob Ryerson. Some great artwork again behind you, Rob. Nice backdrop and good haircut. Hey, if you're only listening right now, boy, you're missing a real shine. You're losing weight. You got great artwork. You got a good hairdo.
Yeah. Well,
you running for office, Rob? What's going on here?
No, we brought some new furniture into our home, which I don't know if this ever happens to you, Doug. I grew up in a house where my mom figured out the way she wanted the furniture in the house, and it never moved.
And that was that. Yeah.
That was that. I mean, and so I married someone very, very different from my mother. Married someone who just periodically will move all the furniture just to see what happens.
Okay.
And so we got we had some new furniture added to our home, and that necessitated a switching around of everything. And so our dining room moved into the living room. The living room moved into the office.
Yeah.
And the office moved into the dining room. So, that's why I don't have a wall of books behind me anymore. That's now in the living room. And so I have this big piece of art done by my eldest child, who we went to Chicago this weekend to see their Bachelor of Fine Arts show as they are finishing up at the school at the Art Institute of Chicago. So, yeah. And I got a haircut because I needed a haircut.
You did. It looks great. Looking sharp. Looking sharp and clean. Ready for our Tuesday conversation about politics. And it's funny you say that, though, about your furniture. Shelly and I she said, Shelly's the person I've been married to for a very long time. And she said, I think I want to update our furniture here in this family room. She said, in fact, I'd like to change the carpet. And I said, yeah, we've somehow we had a conversation about how long we've had the carpet. And she's apparently right about this, that it's 22 years. 22 years. And I was like, it still looks great. I think the walls are painted the same color for the last 15 years. Our couch is something like that. And I'm like, man, we are clearly those people. You just get to a certain age and it doesn't seem like it's been that long, because I remember when we put the carpet in, so it can't be 22 years ago.
Yeah.
That was just the other night. Now I walk in that room and I'm just like, get this carpet out of here. I'm just ready to rip it out myself. I can't live with it any longer.
Will you rip it out yourself, or will you hire some folks to do it?
I have torn out so much carpet in my life, in properties we've lived in. I've owned rental properties. I grew up in an apartment complex where my parents were the managers, and part of my summer jobs, and sort of summer jobs am I talking about? The right that I had to live in my parents' apartment with them was that I had to work, which is a very good thing. I ripped out, I was 11 years old when I learned how to rip out carpet. And it's a little secret that a lot of people don't know, how easy it is to just grab the corner with a little pair of pliers and pull up that first bit, and you can rip up some carpet. And I had some friends that I grew up with that I should not have told them that, because, well, sometimes kids just tear up carpet, like in their room. Can really cause a kerfluffle.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes I feel like when we talk about politics around here, we're talking about some of that same sort of thing. Like, what do we got to do to update this thing? It's been the same way for 22 years. Can we make it? Can we make it a little different? And today we're going to get to talk to somebody who wants to be the lieutenant governor of the great state of Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be great. TikTok influencer Kelly Krout is going to be joining us. And frankly, I want to talk to you about her campaign, but also just like the whole lieutenant governor thing.
I know.
It's something I have. We have one here, Peggy Flanagan. She's great. I know her. I've been to things with her. I have no idea what a lieutenant governor. It's kind of like a vice president, but maybe not really, because maybe you run on your own. And anyway, a whole thing that I feel like are the governor, lieutenant governor dealio for a lot of people is a mysterious black box. So I think it'll be quite interesting to, catch up on her and see if we can get some people turned on to what she's up to.
Absolutely. And Kelly's one of my favorites, so I'm excited about her being on the podcast with us.
Hey, we should also note that there was an incident, an attack, shooting, bombing, some kind of thing happened in Brooklyn, New York today at a subway. I was just seeing the news about that before we started this conversation, so maybe even by now more information is out. Doesn't sound like a lot of people were killed, but there was somebody who shot people in the legs and tried to set off a smoke bomb of some kind, wore a gas mask, like the kind of thing that just, terrifies all of us in any city, but especially in New York, and especially in the subway. It just feels like, boy, that is an environment that is just ripe for real disaster. And I'm glad no one has attacked it before in really devastating ways.
Yeah.
So, whatever's going on there. Hey, speaking of terrorist attacks, Rob, we didn't get a chance to finish this conversation yesterday, but the guys who were arrested for plotting and scheming to kidnap the governor of Michigan, Governor Whitmer, were basically found either not guilty or hung jury of the crimes of plotting to kidnap her, which I guess on the face of it, it's good that the judicial system vets out charges against people, and if they're indeed not guilty of crimes that the state has brought against them, they should be found innocent, right? Like sometimes I think in the political spaces, a lot of us cheer on verdicts that we agree with and we bemoan verdicts we disagree with. Mm-hmm. But we should try to have some level of respect for the fact that the way the system works is that police officers arrest and prosecutors indict and judges run a trial and juries issue a verdict, and that's all supposed to keep itself in balance. We shouldn't just assume that if the FBI wants to arrest someone or a prosecutor wants to charge someone that they're necessarily guilty. But this case is a little more complicated than just that. They clearly did some things, but whether or not they were, have you been following this particular one?
I haven't been following it nearly as closely as I probably should have, because I think I just assumed, oh yeah, these guys are guilty. They're gonna I made a bunch of assumptions, probably based on my political biases that.
Well, apparently they did some things, and this little line here from their defense attorney is interesting. If you're able to see the screen, it reads this: defense attorneys portrayed their clients, these four men, as credulous weekend warriors prone to big wild talk who were often stoned. They said the FBI undercover agents and informants tricked and cajoled the men into agreeing to a conspiracy. So the defense is these guys, wackadoodles, stoned out of their minds a lot of the time, talking big on social media, talking big when they get with everyone else. They're not actually going to do any of this. And the prosecutor countered that entrapment claim by saying that they had evidence that the men discussed abducting the governor before the FBI sting even began, and they went beyond talk, including scouting Whitmer's summer home, testing explosives, and plotting and scheming. But as it turns out, the jury said, "Look, these guys, they're not guilty of the charges that the prosecutor brought against them." Maybe believing that the FBI was poking around a little too much and moving these guys along, which I think is kind of interesting in its own right. But the idea that some of these people on the internet are weekend warriors, big talkers, and high a lot of the time, and that's your defense. Hey, we're not really dangerous. We just talk big and we sort of, plot and scheme, but we're not actually going to do anything. I get it that that's something someone shouldn't be convicted of if that's not a crime. But the line between that and running up the stairs of the Capitol and attacking the Capitol when the President of the United States instructs you to do so is so thin that, beyond the legality of it, I don't know, it feels like that just sort of puts all of us in a bit of danger. You could imagine the governor or any governor or lieutenant governor, as we're going to be talking with Kelly Krout here in a bit, and any elected official feeling really vulnerable that, well, what if the weekend warriors kind of step over the line that one time and do that thing that, well, we hadn't expected they were actually going to do it, but they did. Like everybody's got their first time where they engage in actions like that.
Yeah, I I think I would have bought the big talk weekend warrior defense.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would have. Uh, I, I think I would have said, "Oh, come on, tough guys with their big pickup trucks, like compensating for something, like those like that kind of mentality that we have to downplay threats and dismiss them, and to convince ourselves that we live in a world of relative peace, and that we're not constantly in danger." I think I would have bought into all of that, and then January 6th happened.
Yeah.
And I mean, in my mind, that's the thing that changes all the scenarios, because all of a sudden the big talk, the political rhetoric of revolution, which, I come from very, very progressive political groups that, talk about revolution language has been,
Sure.
just in the ethos.
Since the revolution, we've been big into revolution
but it's
talk in
been,
this country. Yeah.
it's been a normal part of it, fighting and, taking the country back, and all of that kind of political rhetoric that we would think is all just big talk. January 6th changed the scenario that, wait a minute, this might not just be big talk. There might actually be something to this.
Yeah.
And so that's what is, on the one hand, go ahead.
Okay, especially if you're somebody in the FBI or you're in some of the groups that are watching these guys, to distinguish, as you say, when the experience has been so intense, it's tough for people to know how to do this. Some people in the chat are making a really good point. These are guys that had assault weapons or assault style weapons legally owned. And again, this is part of the problem in our society, is that individual people, for their own purposes, for no other explanation at all, can own weapons that are normally used in war contexts. So they can just own them. They can own all the things to make them be a military. These guys had all of that kind of thing. And as Tricia says, the FBI thought that same thing about January 6th, right? They heard this chatter. They heard it going on. They knew the president was talking about it. They gave presidential briefs that they thought danger could happen. But they also thought, but really, these people are not going to do this. They're not going to step over the line. And with no credit to the failed presidential candidate and twice impeached former president of the United States, his argument is that couldn't have been our people. I mean, our people don't actually do stuff like that. I think he's so delusional, and so many people who support him are so delusional. They truly still believe that it was Antifa or some other group, because they think the way this jury thought. These people are not the kind of people that are going to do these things until they do. I mean, that's the funny thing about all of our lives, right? The great heroic stories is, who would have known this person could do it? Right? We make documentaries about that. You tell stories about that. We write books about people for whom you're like, who knew that this person who had never accomplished this before in their life went off and did this thing? Normally, we only do that when something's wonderful and great. But it's also, wow, I never saw that coming.
Yeah.
And that's what happened on January 6th. And I think it just terrifies our entire system. Now, I don't know what we do about it. I have some ideas, but they don't fit our country, like taking guns away from all of us and just, giving everybody a flower. That would be much better than people walking around with guns. I think I almost got robbed yesterday. Can I tell you this story?
Oh, tell me this story.
Yeah. So I'm selling a computer, a MacBook, and I put it on Facebook Marketplace, which is just a den of iniquity. That thing. I mean, just how in the world can it not be just full of scammer after scammer, wanting me to ship things and just the nonsense around it. But anyway, there I am again, as a fool repeating his folly, putting something on Facebook Marketplace because I don't know where else to sell the thing. So this person, we agree to meet. We're back and forth on Facebook Messenger. And he says, well, I can meet you at this place in this church, at my church, in my parking lot. So I pull up in the parking lot. I message him. He says, okay, what car are you in? And I tell him what car I'm in. He says, all right, I'm walking over from my house. So this guy walks up. He's got his hood pulled up, and I get out. I leave the computer in the car. I get out and meet him in the parking lot. And he kind of looks at me, and he looks at me a little sort of squeamish, a little shady. And he says, I said, hey, are you Will? He says, yeah. He said, so I shake his hand, and it's a little awkward. And I said, do you have the money with you? And he goes, no. Now we're closer to my car. He says, no, I don't have the money. I wasn't sure if you were here to rob me. And I said, are you going to rob me? He goes, no. And I said, okay, well, you want to buy this computer? You don't have the money. What are we doing here? And so I'm starting to feel real awkward. Fortunately, we're in the middle of this parking lot. I said, hey, is this your church? He goes, yeah. I don't think it's his church for a whole lot of reasons that I don't think it's his church. And he says, well, okay, then I'll call my brother and he'll bring the money over. And I was like, okay, well, if you thought I was going to rob you, why didn't you bring your brother with you? So then he kind of turns and walks through the park and starts walking back toward his house like he's on his phone, and then just sort of disappears. And I texted him and said, hey, man, I'm totally uncomfortable with this thing. So I don't know what was going on. My read was that I got out of the car, sort of met him in the parking lot, didn't have the computer in my hand. I'm a bigger person than most. I think I was significantly larger than him. And I think he felt like, okay, this isn't sort of going the way I thought, and I'll just sort of. But it was the weirdest thing where he said, "No, I didn't bring the money because I didn't know if you were going to rob me." You pick the place.
You two weirded each other out, and as a result, didn't go through with the transaction you both wanted to go through with.
I don't think he wanted to go through with it. I mean,
he saw you. He thought you were going to, as much as right now, he's on a podcast saying to somebody, I think I almost got robbed yesterday. There was this guy. He was supposed to sell me a computer. He gets out of his car. He doesn't even have the computer.
No, I told him it's right there. I told him it's right there in the truck. No, it was.
Yeah, that's exactly what you would say if you were going to rob him.
Yes. My point is, if you got a brother somewhere who's got the actual money, you don't show up with that brother when you think you're about to get jumped in a parking lot.
He didn't think he was going to get jumped in the parking lot. He took one look at you and thought, this guy's going to rob me, and claimed he didn't have the money with him.
Oh no, he didn't have the money with him.
Nah, I think the two of you weirded each other out and missed out on a transaction you both wanted to make.
No. Because then when I messaged him, like, hey, what's going on? I don't think this is, and then it was like, everything was shady. Like his Instagram had 4 followers, like all the things, all the dealios, and but no, this was not when he picks the place and then doesn't show up with the money and then says, hey, I don't know. And then, and there's a bunch of people around, like we're in a parking lot. There's people coming in and going to church and coming in and out, like a super sort of safe environment.
Yeah.
I don't think when you're the person that picks that sets the place, you're not the one that's, feeling like you're about to get.
How did we get here?
Well, I was talking about the weekend warrior guys.
Oh, there you go.
And the people that, the people that we should be afraid of. So I raise all of that because in the city where I live, there's all kinds of carjackings that have been going on. I don't know if you know this, but it's been a real thing. Like people literally just getting in people's cars, opening their doors, ripping them out and taking their cars. Like that's a thing going on. This was in that similar part of town. And so normally, I mean, I am someone, as you know, like I have zero sensibility that people are going to rob me. When people are like, be sure to lock your car. And I'm like, oh, sure, I will. But like, if you're going to rob my car, you're just going to break the window, Well, you make it harder on people. Like, it doesn't make it harder on someone who's prepared to steal your car. But I just have an attitude, look, I'm not going to go around as if I'm going to be robbed. A little freaked out though last night driving home. I'm like, holy moly, that was a to-do. That was a particular dealing. So I'm saying that's the kind of thing that now I think our whole country is now paying closer attention to, that, wow, we came really close to, people getting their hands on an elected official of any variety and causing them physical harm. And then you hear stories about these guys like, well, I wouldn't have said yes to kidnapping the governor if the FBI informant guy hadn't tricked me and cajoled me into it. So, but I didn't follow the actual trial. But I think it's indicative of something larger than just this, and that is, the role of violence is just really something else. Hey, and do you hear that the former failed president had this? He did a conversation with a set of historians about their book that they wrote. Remember we talked about this a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, we talked about.
Just heard an interview this morning with the guy who put that book together. They just did the interview in July. The book is coming out, and he talks about the hour-long Zoom meeting that they have about it, and the stuff that that Trump is saying in the meeting, and he left it. This man left it saying, "Oh, that guy's going to run again." He's clearly bothered that the story is not ending in the way he wants it to, and he needs to get everyone to see it his way, and that's going to be the thing that ultimately.
Now, how does that strike you? Does that resonate with you? Do you think that's an accurate read on the failed former president?
Yeah, I think so. Seems like an accurate read that he wants to. I don't think he can get the apparatus together to pull it off. I think it takes a lot of people, especially, not the stage where he was before, when he's sort of just a random candidate that was going to get a lot of attention. The scrutiny on him now and trying to get a team together, and the number of people are going to say no. I think that getting from there to, like, anybody running legitimately for president takes a lot. It takes a lot to run for lieutenant governor. And so glad we're going to talk with Kelly here in a minute too. But to be able to run for president, I think just takes a lot. Yeah. My guess is he wants to, and is going to just be raging mad that he can't, and that he won't be able to get the entire I mean, do you think Jared and Ivanka and all the crowd and all those? I mean, he can't go with. I guess he could go with Paul Manafort again. He could pick up somebody. But you think Mark Meadows? Think all these people are going to say oh no, let's spend another 6 years of our lives.
I think Don Jr. I think Don Jr. will be the one who pushes him towards it, because I think Don Jr.'s got his own ambition. But Doug, I cannot wait until
that is. Let's talk about somebody whose election would actually be good for the world.
Oh, seriously, I was just going to say, I cannot wait until we do not talk about these people anymore. Oh my goodness. So listen, as folks know, I live here in the state of Arkansas, and that has meant that we've had like a steady stream of Arkansans on the podcast to talk about what's going on. And I have found that we have like these just really wonderful hidden gems here in the Diamond State. Ooh, you like that? That's a little
hidden gemstones.
Hidden righteous gemstones or something like that here in Arkansas. And we've met Chris Jones, who's running for governor. And we have a little quirk here in Arkansas where we actually elect our lieutenant governor separate. It's not like a ticket where the person running for governor picks who their running mate is going to be. We actually elect our lieutenant governor. And our guest today is Kelly Krout, who's running for lieutenant governor. One of my favorites, of people that I've met who's running around the country. And I don't know, producer Dan, why don't we start with the video to introduce Kelly a little bit, and then we'll talk with it.
Hi, I'm Kelly Krout, and I'm running for lieutenant governor. Ugh, another campaign ad? Why? Because Arkansas deserves leaders who are willing to do the right thing, even when it's hard. I'm running because whether we like it or not, policy impacts all of us. And I also believe most people want what's best for families. We just don't always agree on what that looks like. My family fostered for a while because we wanted to help families and children. When we couldn't take in any more kids, I went back to school to study social work to be able to help more families. When I started learning about social work policy, I decided I really wanted to get involved. That's why I'm running for lieutenant governor.
Wait, aren't you that lady with like 16 kids?
7, actually, but it's made me wildly efficient. That's like a whole team. And we work together like one, which reminds me, I have absolutely no patience for bad sportsmanship, and we're seeing a lot of that in politics right now. I'm Kelly Krout, and I'm running for Lieutenant Governor because I'll never stop fighting for my family or yours.
Hey, that's a great ad, Kelly. Congratulations. So glad to have you on.
Thank you.
And look, we're foster parents. My wife and I were foster parents. Ended up adopting some two of the boys that we fostered. Rob's an adoptive parent, so you're in shared company here.
Awesome.
With all of this. All right. Well, we ask everyone who runs. Well, first of all, thank you for running. Thanks for putting yourself out there. What was the pathway for you? What got you from that moment that you're sitting there finishing or working on that social work degree to then somewhere, somehow saying, maybe I should run for office? And of any office, I'm going to run for the lieutenant governor of Arkansas. What was that path?
Well, that's a fair question, and it was kind of a strange path, as many probably are. So this is my second campaign. I also ran for state representative in the last cycle, and the way that kind of popped up, I was in my graduate program and sitting in a social work policy class, and just realizing, gosh, policy really impacts everybody, and it's impacting a lot of groups of people way more than other groups of people. And at that time, I was seeing people pop up running for office that just did not share my values. And so I reached out to my county party on Facebook, and I was like, hey, who's running in District 90? And they were like, no one. You want to do it? And I was like, cool, sure. So I just really jumped in with both feet, trying to figure out as I went. And it was kind of exciting. And then of course the pandemic happened, and we were trying to figure out, I was trying to learn how to be a candidate in the first place, and then how to be a candidate during a pandemic. And nobody knew how to campaign in a pandemic. Right. And so I decided to go kind of rogue and wanted to meet people where they were, and where they were was at home on their phones. And so I did a lot of social media campaigning and built kind of a following and people who were excited about government for the first time. And we did not win that race, obviously, but we did move the needle pretty substantially. And so when time came to decide what to run for this time, I did want to run again. I wanted to use my skill set the best possible for the party, the best possible for the state of Arkansas. Where was I going to make the most sense? And so I was asked about lieutenant governor. And the more I thought about that, the more I thought this might be a good fit. And so statewide, a tad different beast than a local, but we're having a good time. And I feel like there's a lot of momentum behind the campaign.
And what's the process of the election now? Are you in a primary? Do you have other elections before November? What's the calendar look like?
Right. No, I don't have a primary. There was no one else in the Democratic Party running. However, there are 6 Republicans that are running for lieutenant governor and an independent. So it's kind of a crowded primary over there. So that's going to be interesting. But my kids like to joke, I've got to buy to the finals. So I will be on the ballot in November. Yeah.
You're clearly a sports fan.
We love it.
So Kelly, can we talk about like what a lieutenant governor does? Like, is this, I just have like visions of Veep in my head of, like what does a lieutenant governor do?
Yeah, that's a lot of people have that question, and most people don't know it, and that's totally fine. So the lieutenant governor serves as a vice president pretty much with the limit, solely with the purpose of if the governor dies or resigns, they would become the governor the next day. And here in Arkansas, we've seen that happen. That's about where the similarities of vice president end. They also would serve as, they would preside over the Senate, so would provide a tie-breaking vote. Now, we don't see a lot of ties in the Senate here in Arkansas, but in theory, that could happen. I like to kind of joke that lieutenant governor has like first lady vibes to it. A lot of lieutenant governors kind of pick a cause and run with it because it's the second highest executive leadership position in the state. You really do have a big platform to be able to speak about important issues. And so that's really a big part of what drew me to the office, because I feel like that's something that I could excel at.
No.
So you got excited about running for office, it sounds like you ran and you thought, hey, this is actually something I want to do and I want to run again. A lot of people say, I ran for office and it's like the first time I ran a marathon. It's a one and done and I'm never doing that again. It sounds like you got the bug and said, hey, I like this and I want to engage with people and I want to offer myself toward service in politics. What is it about running that you liked enough to say, well, let's look for another chance to run again?
it's a I guess I'm kind of a glutton for punishment because it is really hard. It's a lot of work. I also feel like I need to acknowledge the elephant in the room that yes, I am hanging out under a bunk bed. My dishwasher is running downstairs, and my husband's working from home. So this was the quietest spot in my house. I don't usually
That's
decorate
fantastic.
with lights up. Anyway, ignore that. But yeah, I got a lot of energy. I like to choose to do things that bring me energy that I enjoy. I love talking to voters. I love getting people involved in a process that they have seen as not accessible to them. I think politics has moved in a direction of seeming, well, one, really nasty, and we need kind, decent humans in the arena. And then two, very elite. People think, well, I'm not qualified. I don't know enough to be involved. I don't know how to contact so and so. And so I've spent a lot of time on my platform making it as accessible as possible. Like there's no dumb questions. Like people are like, "Oh, what's a primary?" Like, "Okay, no problem. We can talk about what a primary is," because you don't know until you know. So I just do a lot of answering questions and getting people involved. And when people do not feel intimidated by it, and when people find somebody relatable that they like involved in it, they want to get involved in it. And Arkansas really is not great on political engagement. We're worst in voter turnout. We're worst in voter registration. And so we're really working to change that by targeting different demographics and making it a little bit more fun. Honestly, it doesn't all have to be terrible.
Did you know a lot about politics yourself before sending off that fateful Facebook message to the
Right.
political party?
I had been paying more attention a few years prior to that, but I will very much admit to have been pretty politically apathetic in my early 20s, and a good chunk of my little adult life. And I see now the privilege in that. Some of these policy things were not impacting me in the way that they are impacting other people. And then once I started paying attention, I'm kind of an all in or all out kind of person. Like once I knew a little, I was like, oh, I need to know more about what's going on here. And then I want to help other people know more about what's going on here. And what held me back was it seemed too overwhelming. And so I'm trying to make it less overwhelming.
Yes. Kelly, the scenario I just keep imagining in my head, and I don't know if it amuses me or terrifies me, and that is, I mean, like I'm all in for Chris Jones. As folks who listen to the podcast know, I've got a Chris Jones sign in my yard right outside. I'm all in for Chris. I want nothing more than for him to be our governor here in Arkansas. But we do elect our lieutenant governor here in Arkansas, as opposed to electing a ticket. So there is a scenario in which Sarah Huckabee Sanders could be the governor and you could be the lieutenant governor. Have you spent any time with that scenario? And how would that work?
Yeah, this is actually a question I get a lot, and I love answering it because I think it could be really interesting. I do agree we've got some fantastic candidates for governor, and I would like to see things go that way as well. But it is Arkansas, and it's set up very uniquely. But I have a unique ability somehow to bring in some Republican. I had a lot of Republican voters last time who were like, "You're the first Democrat that I've ever voted for," and I think I come off maybe pretty moderate. I don't necessarily consider myself super moderate. However, I think policy would be so. But I think I have a potential to bring in some voters that would vote for both Sarah Huckabee Sanders and for me. I had a bunch of Trump Krout voters in the last one. It's fascinating. But I used to be very, very conservative. I've only, in the past 10, 15 years moved more to the other end of the spectrum. And so I very much understand how conservatives think. I very much thought when I thought more that way, I'm doing the most loving, accepting thing by thinking this way and supporting these policies. And it wasn't until I was around people that were not like me, who were not also benefiting from the privilege that I was experiencing, that I realized, oh, wait, maybe I need to rethink this. And so when I was in that space, I wasn't doing that in a malicious manner. I really thought I was doing the right thing. And so I think it makes me pretty approachable as far as, hey, I'm really conservative, but I want to talk about what you think. And, maybe I could mellow her out, like just a hair. I think we could bring some interesting balance. Where a bunch of the clash comes in is we're never going to agree on abortion, for example. You're just not going to get people to agree. We should be able to agree on how can we prevent unplanned pregnancies. So if we can step back and look at the proactive part, we can often agree there. And I think that's where we can bridge a lot of the divides. So hopefully I could get her talking about being proactive rather than reactive.
Kelly, I appreciate that so much. And our theory around here is that a lot of voters vote for the person and not just the party. But then there's a lot of people who do vote for the party. And in a lot of the conversations that we have with kinds of voters that you're going to need to connect with, they have a really hard time thinking about voting for a Democrat because in their minds, it's just a bridge so far, and they would say like, how could I vote for somebody that wants to harm babies or something like this, right? And the people like me say, boy, I feel like this next elections are about the choice between a democracy and autocracy, and like the people that support violent revolutionary takeovers of the Capitol on January 6th are not the kind of people that are just like, we're having a policy dispute here and we're on different sides. What I'm saying is it just gets ratcheted up so much, right? We all kind of feel that. And you've put yourself into the political center in the middle of all of that. How do you think about the sort of feelings that exist around all of this and sort of your own thought that, boy, we have a political movement in this country, this kind of authoritarian political movement that doesn't feel like it's just Republicans or Democrats or something. It's this other force. Do you think about that at all, or what's going on with your? Absolutely. And because you're a person you might be running sort of on a ticket, or could win with, is somebody who's associated with the Trump administration very deeply, and she carried the water for them and did a lot of that work herself. So it just feels like, my goodness, we're in this moment that feels so different.
Right. And it can be overwhelming. And I think part of what we've got to do is zoom out and realize part of this is a voter engagement problem, because the way that we have gotten in such extreme politics in Arkansas is because people are winning their elections and primaries. They're going unopposed. We have our most intense, our most involved voters, sometimes our most extreme voters showing up in the primary. So the most extreme candidate wins. And then sometimes we've got a fella that just says, I'd like to be the state senator, and he signs up and nobody even primaries him. So people aren't even having to vote this person in. And if you're winning in the primary, you're being elected by what, like 8% of the electorate in your district. So we got to zoom out and we've got to fix that problem first. As far as some of the other with the more extreme stuff, I think just being able to always zoom out and talk about the prevention. Sorry, I lost my train of thought on your actual question. Go back to the last.
I'm just saying, you've put yourself into this environment when you know that people are saying to you, you can't support those. Like we're not in a place where these folks are workable, on both sides. Like it's just become so heated that way.
And there are always going to be people that you just can't have civil conversation with. But that's another big part of why I want to be in this race, is to bring some civility back to politics. What I think is interesting and kind of refers back to what I was saying, like somehow I come off a little bit more moderate than I am, is that because I can kind of see both sides, even if I don't agree with both sides, I can understand sometimes where people are coming from. And, I've done some of these things that like the hardcore anti-abortion crowd would say, well, have you done this, this, and this? Well, actually, yeah, I have. Actually. And then the people who were like, oh, well, what about guns? I'm like, I'm a gun owner. Like we've got a gun safe. We've got a ton of guns. Like the things I'm suggesting wouldn't impact responsible gun owners. So some of the more hot topic issues, I'm just very comfortable talking about. And a lot of times people don't even understand what Democrats think about those issues. I found a lot when I was advocating against some of the anti-trans bills in the last legislative session. People don't know what gender affirming healthcare is. And we can't blame them for that. They weren't taught that. And so taking a step back and being like, hey, listen, this is what we're actually talking about. You might not even have a problem with this if you understood what was literally happening at these doctor appointments,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kelly, so much of your campaign is, feels to me like it's educational. And do you feel like that's the key to kind of overcoming the lack of voter participation that we have in the state? And do you think that is a model for, that other campaigns ought to be trying and going after?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think back to when I was pretty politically apathetic. It was because I did not feel educated enough to know what I was doing, and so I didn't want to be involved. That felt
Mhm.
irresponsible to me. I remember going to the poll. I would go vote, like in
Mhm.
presidential elections and stuff, and I would skip a lot of the
Yeah.
sections. I'm like, I don't know anything
Yeah.
about either of these people, so it feels irresponsible for me to vote at all. And if I was feeling that way, I know other people are feeling that way. So yeah, I think
Mhm.
education is a huge, huge part of it. And I just had an experience just this weekend where I was checking into a hotel and the lady's asking what I'm doing. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm actually here doing some campaigning stuff today and tomorrow. And she was like, oh, well, tell me about your campaign. And so I did a little bit. I go up to my room and then she actually calls the room and she's like, Miss Krout, would you actually come back downstairs? I have some questions for you. And I was like, sure. And she was like, I'm a Republican. I've always voted Republican. Me and my family were all Republicans. And I saw what you stand for. And I actually like this. And I had a couple of questions. And we had like this lovely civil
Hmm.
conversation. She had never spoken to a candidate before, ever.
Mm.
And she was like, oh, this person's not the,
Yeah.
demonic
Yeah.
presence I thought they might be. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know Demon stayed at the Holiday Inn Express. That's
Um,
really
Yeah.
something. How do
It was
you
so
get that?
pleasant. And so I love being able to have conversations like that with people who have really not had access to a candidate to
Yeah.
actually interact with face to face.
You know,
Yeah.
one of the things that we do our framing around, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this because it feels like you're doing this so well. Are these three areas, one of those being education? People need to know something they didn't know. They want some information. They just feel uninformed. But then there's this other piece, which is they need an invitation. Like someone needs to say, join me. And then
Mhm.
there needs to be a community of participation they can feel part of.
Right.
And that story of the person at that hotel feels like that, right? There was
Right.
some like, oh, this person, Kelly, is standing here in my lobby and I could join her. Like she's the thing that I could join. Feels like Democrats spend a lot of time on the education and information side. I think we all tend to be people who believe that, education is power and knowledge is power and that will change people. And
Mhm.
Republicans spend a lot of time on the invitation and the join our group and feel very reinforced that there's a
Okay.
group that they're part of.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of people who don't want to be in that world and they feel a little bit lost. Do you have any thoughts about that in politics? Does any of that ring true with you? Do you think we need
Yeah.
invitation and participation as much as the information education side?
That's an interesting take, and I'm going to simmer on that one a little bit. But I do think that might explain why using something like TikTok has been pretty
Mm.
successful for me because that's people aren't even having to get off the app that they were playing on in the first place, and then they get to feel a part of a movement. And we've kind of created this little community where like people will buy a Kelly shirt that they link to off of TikTok, and then they're at the grocery store in Conway, and somebody else is like, "Oh wait, I follow Kelly," and then they're making connections across the state, and I don't even know these people individually, but I'm being able to have the position of a connector, which is making people feel a part of a group, which I think has a lot of potential to
Mhm.
shift things in the state. And it's a real honor. It's surreal and bizarre to hear those
Yep.
stories. But when you look at it from like a psychology standpoint like that, like when you feel like you're part of a group, it feels more powerful.
Mhm.
Yeah. Kelly, let's talk about the TikTok thing. Like, were you on TikTok before the campaign, or like, did you dream about being a social media influencer? Like, what?
Yes, ever since I was
How
a
does
child.
how does this
All I want
how does this happen that you are? I mean, I think TikTok, and I think I don't know how old you are. I think me personally, I am too old to be on TikTok.
Hmm.
And how did all that come about?
Listen, I'm almost 40. Okay. I'm not too old to be on TikTok. So you're not too old to be on TikTok. And I've actually done kind of some deep dives on the research. And yes, the majority are 18 to 30, but there are good chunks of people in older age groups that are on TikTok. But it very much I downloaded it at the beginning of the pandemic, like a lot of people, just like I'm stuck at home. I'm just, messing around on this thing. And then the more I was paying attention, I was like, ooh, you could use this style to explain a platform. You could use this trend to make a joke about this issue and bring awareness to it. And so I just sort of started paying attention to what other people were doing. And that's all TikTok is like trends that go over and over, little, meme culture, basically, that you shift in to fit your niche. And so I was one of the only politicians doing it at the time, and it kind of caught on, and it was a fresh idea, and people have an idea of what politicians are in their head, and it's not somebody who's doing trends on TikTok. And so I think, again, it was just sort of the novelty of it, like, oh, this girl's doing something kind of different, I'm going to follow along, and then had a couple of videos take off that brought kind of a bizarre following. It still is very strange to me that many people will tune in to see what I'm up to, but it's been really, really cool and beneficial to a campaign to I mean, we immediately, when we launched, had over 300 volunteers sign up across the whole state because people were like, "Oh yeah, I'll be a part of this. I'm already following her." So,
interesting.
It's a really cool tool.
Your sons, they shake your head. They shake their heads at you like on TikTok. I know my own kids, and they're just like, "Oh, Dad." Like, do you get that from your boys?
Some of them, the little ones, I don't think really understand like the
Sure.
reach of some of these videos.
You still love your mom. Yeah, they're little boys.
Yeah, my high schooler is kind of like, Mom, my friends are watching, like, after I ate. But I try not to be too embarrassing. But then he'll be in TikToks with me every now and then, so he's clearly not totally ashamed. But they tease me about it a little bit. But it's neat when we're out and about. We go out to dinner, and then someone's like, "Oh, hey, I support your campaign. I've been following you," and they're like, "Wait, people are watching this stuff?" And so it's been kind of fun for me with the kids to watch other people, interact like in public because they've been following, and then the kids are like, "Oh, maybe that's cooler than I thought it was."
Yeah.
Oh, it seems like a really smart.
What's been different about campaigning? I mean, this is your second race, but take people inside like the real life of a candidate. Like what would be a surprise to folks in terms of like what this is actually like?
I think people would be surprised how much time you spend on the phone calling people and asking for money, which is, really awkward at first, but I've had some really fun conversations that way. That is a time-consuming labor of love, though. So there's a lot of on the phone. I spend a lot of time trying to create, hey, how can I talk about this topic in a way that is not divisive, that brings people together, that educates. I do spend a lot of time on the creative side of it. And then now doing a statewide campaign, especially now that some COVID restrictions are a little bit, more chill, we are on the road a lot. And Arkansas is a small state in theory, but when you live in the very northwest corner of it, going to the other corner of it, that's a long day. So it's a time-consuming thing to travel about. It's got a lot of moving pieces. My state rep race, I pretty much got to control every piece of it because it was small and it was during a pandemic, so everything was a little bit different. This, I've had to delegate a bunch of stuff out, which for a control freak is a little bit more difficult. So that's been a learning curve for me of like, okay, yes, no, you totally take care of that, and I will try not to worry about it.
So it's great that you're able to connect with so many people that feel outside the system. How is the actual democratic apparatus system in Arkansas, though? Because it's really hard to win any election with just people outside the system, right? You need all the structure. How is it going, and what help do you need? I mean, this is our time. We want people to know about it. We want them to send you money. We want them to show up and help or get on some list. But how is it looking in the structure and system of the parts of this process that are supposed to help a candidate like you? Is it built out? Is it missing? What's the story?
Right. No, that's a good question. And for another sports metaphor, we're in a rebuilding year. We've been working, we've got some different leadership in the Democratic Party. They've been working hard to get us out of debt and really engage county parties. And another piece of what has been exciting about getting to engage volunteers for my campaign is that we're plugging them into their local party and go get involved here. And so like if I say, hey, I'm going to Garland County, y'all show up if you want to, people will show up to support me, and then they're getting plugged in with the people in their area. So it's kind of building little coalitions. And so I feel like the party is really starting to rally together and, you know, getting more organized about how they can help. And I'm just seeing a lot of supporting other candidates and lifting each other up, and hey, come to my thing and I'll come to your thing, and just getting to all be there for each other. So I'm excited about the direction that the party is going in Arkansas. Of course, it needs help.
There was a time when Arkansas was a Democratic state, you know, and it's starting to sound like what old people say, you know, way back in the 90s.
It wasn't that long ago.
But truly, it wasn't that long ago. And that's part of, you know, our thinking around here is that, you know, 20 years ago, or sometimes even 40 years ago, isn't impossible to remember. And we can think about what things will be like in 20 years and 40 years from now, right? So the things we do actually build that future that we're talking about. Do you feel like Arkansas is starting to move where statewide a person with a D next to their name on a ballot can win? Or is this, hey, you're going to have to really overcome some systemic and societal odds for this election?
Right. Yeah, no, I think it's definitely moving, and it always does. And I think it will move back Democratic, and then I think it will move back to Republican, like, because that's just how politics goes. It ebbs and it flows. And one of the pieces of kind of education that I like to provide is people are always like, oh, it's a red state, you know, you can't win. I'm like, okay, one, not a red state. It's a non-voting state. We had 1 million people who could have voted in the last election who did not. You can flip anything with 1 million dadgum votes. And just helping people understand that things ebb and they flow, and getting people involved at every part of the process. I can imagine a scenario where we win. I can absolutely imagine a scenario where a statewide race is able to help support down ballot races. And we're focusing a lot of our field campaign in some of these battleground legislative seats. We have several that are very, very winnable. And, you know, you talk about a lot of it's baby steps, it's incremental steps, but our biggest thing we got to do right now is break that supermajority. It's only going to take 3 or 4 seats, I think, to break the supermajority. And we had 3 or 4 seats in the last election that were won or lost by around 40 or less votes, won by 17 votes. And so when you can really zoom into you matter as a human and your literal vote matters, because if your vote can help flip a district that flips the supermajority, now you've impacted the whole state of Arkansas. So we're talking about infrastructure and campaigns and investing in the state as a whole by investing in a statewide campaign that's able to help.
Do you have a target number you talk about? Do you know how many voters are going to vote in this election by your estimates, and how many you have to have? Do you do those numbers? Are you somebody who talks about things like in those terms? Somebody's
doing those numbers. Yes. No, I know based on the last election, I believe our win number is 400,037 or something like that. But hopefully we get a lot more voters out this time, so that number would need to be higher. We'd have to talk to my numbers person for that.
Yeah.
I'm focused on making those phone calls and show it up. And so
no, that's okay. Yeah, I know some candidates keep that in the front of their mind, and some candidates say, I have people that keep that. And that's
yeah,
totally
the goal is we want a whole lot more voters, so that number would be different.
Well, that's what I was wondering, because a presidential election, which you were running in 2020, has a totally different psychology and turnout model. You know, these kinds of midterm elections. And now, yeah, I get it that it's statewide, but still, there are a lot of voters who were like you and like a lot of us who are like, I vote when the president's running. I didn't even know there were other times when other people vote. You know, we call them off-year elections or midterm elections or all this, you know.
This isn't a typical midterm election, though, because we've had redistricting. So every single state Senate seat is up, every single state rep seat is up, and then we've got the governor up. And so, you know, it's a little bit more exciting midterm election than usual. So I think we'll have a bigger turnout than we would typically see.
Yeah. Kelly,
who are you running against? You know, oftentimes people say, well, if not you, then whom? And I get it that in some ways it's whichever these 7 candidates are going to win the Republican nomination. But in people's minds, like, are you running against bad politics? How do they see, like, who's your opponents here in people's minds, or even maybe in your campaign's mind?
Well, I mean, my literal opponents are Leslie Rutledge and Jason Rapert, Joseph Wood, Chris Beckett, Greg Bledsoe, and Doyle Webb. I think that's all of them. There's several, and then I think
Yeah.
Frank Gilbert is the
Okay.
independent. So there's a lot, but I mean, a big picture, I think that the opponent is kind of this new wave of Republican politics that is all about destroying the radical left, and it's just not a thing here in Arkansas. What we just need to be helping people. We need to stop picking on tiny vulnerable groups of people and focus on, hey, what helps the majority of Arkansans. And so just friendly messaging, we're working on that.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really wise and really, really great, because I think that's where a lot of people are. They don't want the opponent to only be the other party. They want the opponent to be the bad things that influence us that politics can make better. That's the thing they want.
I like to think a lot of I am fighting hard against this just nastiness in politics. I am bringing civility. You're not going to see me be ugly to people on the internet or anywhere. It's just, we can't get kind, decent humans to run for office in the political atmosphere that we have created, because kind, decent humans don't want anything to do with that. They have feelings. And so you've got to kind of develop a thick skin to be able to jump into this arena. So we've got to change the dynamic.
Yeah. Kelly, shameless plug. How can people follow you? Where can they find you? How can they donate to your campaign? How does all that work?
I am more than happy to answer that. I am super easy to find. I'm Kelly for Arkansas everywhere. So Kelly with a Y for Arkansas.com. And I'm TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I'm all the places. Just search Kelly for Arkansas and you ought to be able to track me down. And there's easy links to donate at all of those places. And I say all the time, if everybody does a little, no one has to do a lot. I say it to my kids all the time. They get super sick of it. But that's how we build a grassroots campaign. That's how we have a movement that can actually shift the dynamic here in Arkansas, is by getting a lot of people on board. And so anything is super appreciated.
How much money do you have to raise for a lieutenant governor run in Arkansas?
There's not a specific number. Our goal budget right now is $750,000. Our stretch is more like $1 million to be able to do the kind of TV and radio ads that my opponents will certainly do. I can tell you they've got a whole lot more money in the bank than I do right now.
Yeah.
But we're working at it. We're plugging away, and people have been really generous. So.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's good for people to know, right? A lot of, we like this little phrase that a small hinge can open a really big door. And in some ways, I'm sure for you to say $700,000 or $1 million for your, that feels like a lot to people like all of us.
It is. It is
but
a
then
lot.
You look at how much people spend on political stuff, and they'll spend $2 million on an ad campaign, just for some run of TV ads for 6 days, and then it's just spent and it's gone. So the amount of money that does get spent is powerful, and spending smart money, money in ways that has real impact.
Yeah.
That's a different thing. So I think it's helpful for people to realize that, wow, because if someone can make a $25, $100, $500 contribution, well, that's a bigger impact on the total than if somebody's got to raise, because you hear these crazy numbers that people are spending, and we're just, it's out of control.
I try to do a lot of educating on that piece too. People want to know where their money is going. I want you to feel good about giving me your money. I want you to trust that I'm going to be a good steward of your money. You can ask anyone on my campaign team. I am so freaking cheap. I am really picky about how we spend it, because I understand $25 is a lot of money to somebody. And so, just explaining, hey, signs cost money. Those things you get in the mail, those are wildly expensive. To get your name out there, you have to put money behind it. And I'm coming in here without political, experience, really. I don't have the kind of name recognition that a standing legislator or office holder has. So we're going to have to work twice as hard.
So glad you're running. Can't wait for you to be the lieutenant governor of Arkansas. And thanks for being with us today.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. Thank you for the invite.
Thanks, Kelly.
KellyForArkansas.com.org, TikTok, all the spots, all the places. So thank you. All the best.
All right, what do I do? Hang up?
Yeah, I don't know. You can't get out. You're just here with us forever, Kelly. We're never letting you go. We're just never going to let you go. Well, that's a terrific one. Terrific.
Yeah, I am just, Doug, I feel like I say this every time after we talk to a candidate. I'm just constantly amazed the caliber of people
Yeah.
that are offering themselves now. Granted, we're curating this list and we're not bringing folks the duds, but these are
right.
just
plenty.
amazing people who are running for
Mhm.
office that the country would do better if someone like Kelly is serving in office.
Yep.
Yeah.
So good. Well, anybody listening, hope you're thinking about running. I don't know, maybe you didn't even know lieutenant governor was a thing, and somebody's like, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to run for lieutenant governor. How about that? Somebody's going to go home. Their spouse is going to hand them a phone and say, you have to listen to this. You have to do this. You have to run for office. Hey, we'll be back tomorrow. In fact, in the same little channel where you're watching all this, you get a little special today. It's there's an afternoon bonus episode with Gretchen Barton. So, just don't turn off your social media feeds from the Vote Common Good or from the Christian left world ever. Keep it all flowing. All right, friends, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Rob, anything else? Producer Dan,
Nope.
anything else?
Nope. Good to go.
Okay. Bye, everybody.